Halloween special. Bwahaha. I would talk in that voice the whole time, but I will die. So instead, I'll continue and say, Halloween is upon us, and perhaps the world has never been this spooky and terrifying as it is right now. It looks pretty dark out there, but we are all here. We're going to envision a bright, happy, joyous winter instead of that dark winter they want us to envision, because we know our minds and our souls are powerful enough to stop them in their machinations, or at least derail them somewhat by giving our attention elsewhere. And we're empowering ourselves tonight with the most delightful of dives into the realm of subconscious energies, paranormal entities, beings from beyond the veil, subtle energies, and spooky hauntings. Tonight on Rogue Ways, as we are joined by the amazingly accomplished Alan Cicco. Alan has done everything in life, from traveling the world to studying to become a thanatologist and psychologist, to healing himself, mind, body, and soul in order to help heal others, all while mastering Eastern martial arts and even running the Red Lotus Temple in order to bring teachings of the ages to the modern world. But tonight he's here to share with us about his time as a paranormal investigator, and we are so excited to hear those and other tales of intrigue. That wasn't even all your accomplishments, Alan, but how are you doing tonight?
I'm really good. Just enjoying the season, shall we say, and the various costumes of people wearing around in my town. I live in a Halloween town, so we have 7 Halloween stores just in our downtown Main Street. So it's a big production every year.
Oh yeah, I forgot what it was about your town that's specifically Halloween-y, but you told me before.
Yeah, it's we have 2 parades, a regular parade and a zombie parade. And
awesome.
Oh yeah, there's DJs, and everybody's got driving their personal hearses that they've done up to look really nice, and driving around the Ecto 1. Someone's got an Ecto 1 they drive around. So
awesome.
it's a huge party in our downtown all Halloween.
That's so cool. And tell us about your costume here tonight.
Well, I am from the what's that show, Law and Order? I'm Sipowicz. So Sipowicz, who has gone rogue with the bow, with the beard, and looks a little different than his normal routine, but I still got the short sleeve shirt and the tie. So This is my get up tonight from my alternate personality.
That's awesome. Sipowicz.
Yes.
It's awesome to have you here. And we are also joined by the comic genius, Jay Ritichie.
Yes.
Jay is also an overachiever and has slayed life from nearly every angle from his sunny position down south in Florida. Jay creates and produces War on Morons, an incredible sketch comedy audio show that everyone should go right now and subscribe to if you haven't yet. But tonight he is here to bring us the spookiest of ghost stories and insights from his own time as a paranormal investigator, and we cannot wait to hear about it. Jay, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Excited to be back.
Yes, it's awesome to have you. I was just reflecting the other day about one of the first times you were on Rogue Ways years ago, and I couldn't just call you your first name. I had to say Jay Ritichie every time, and I was like, why? I just can't. I can say Alan, I can say Derek, but I have to say Jay Ritichie. So anyway.
I need more syllables.
Yes. Tell us about your costume.
Well, I was trying to think of the scariest thing I could for 2020, so I decided to be a medical professional. So stay inside, wear your mask.
That's awesome.
I'm going to give you a shot.
Trust me, this inoculation will only kill about 80% of you.
Some of you may survive.
Yeah. Do you guys see Bill Gates today saying that it's unfortunate that the shot for the vaccine they're making for COVID is going to hurt so bad? I was like, dude, whatever. By the way, my costume is clearly just this mask, and this is the first time I've worn a mask since COVID started. So there you go. Just special for you guys.
Oh, and I was corrected already. I already messed up the TV show. It was NYPD Blue, not Law and Order. I get those shows are so unique from each other. I can't tell them apart.
Yeah, seriously. It's basically like 50 versions of that one show.
Yeah, thanks for the correction in the comment area down there. Appreciate that.
Oh, Biggie Smollett always knows his stuff. All right, before we jump in tonight, everybody listening, please go to rogue.locals.com. I've got the link below me here. This is where we're going to create our new community. If you love the chat here, people often comment about what a great chat it is and how appropriate and just polite and kind, but also very intelligent. And we don't always agree, but we share our ideas. And, it's a fantastic chat. We have that same community going on in Eyes Open on Facebook, but Facebook is a motherfucker and we need to get rid of it. So Locals Only is a rad place to start this new community. There's already a ton of people there. If you haven't gone yet, please go. There's going to be exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. So go check it out. It's free for everybody. And I hope to see you there. I hope to get people building that same community, but over there. And if you become a supporter there's already people who have become supporters, which has shocked me. And it's wonderful. And thank you guys so much. And if you do become a supporter, I've decided from now until Halloween, so we have 2 days left, then you will also be put in the drawing for the prizes for what has been for the Compassion Fund. I'm going to throw in any supporters that start supporting at rogue.locals.com into that same bin. So to go through those prizes again, we've got the Greatest Forgiveness books. These are full of healing practices, healing calligraphies, and other ways that you can support yourself spiritually, get more in touch with that side. We all know that most of us need some of that. We've got A People's History of the United States, but in graphic novel form. Awesome book to have. And we have Everything You Know Is Wrong by Disinfo. It's basically a book of all the conspiracies ever. This is from 2003, I think. It's pretty old.
That's a great book. The whole series
awesome
that they put out are insanely good.
So good. Yes, and I'm really excited for those. And we also have some Organite plaque, Organite earrings. So you can win any of those things by donating any amount to paypal.me/Corey Sharman. And that will go to the Compassion Fund. Just say in the note that it's for the Compassion Fund. And if you have one of those prizes I just went through that you specifically want to win and be only in the running for that prize, just let me know. If not, if you don't care, we'll just do all of them, right? And finally, before we jump in, 2 books. Earth, A Trough in Time is the new one. Sine Curve Aeons Vitalis is the prequel. You can read them in any order. You can grab them on Amazon, but you can also get them straight from me with a signature and a little note to you that's unique. And I'll send that to you with some Rogue stickers for $17 flat anywhere in the United States. Just send that to paypal.me/Corey Sharman. And I'm happy to get those in the mail to you as fast as possible. So
support your local authors.
Yeah, thank you. Plus, it's a badass book, so, everybody wants to read it. So the pointless question of the episode today, you guys, I was going to ask you guys because I can't stop looking at puppies and dogs because I'm insane. And I was wondering what your favorite breed is.
Jay?
I don't get along well with dogs. I don't know what it is. They're just they're not a fan of me. I'm more of a cat person. I love cats.
I feel like I asked you this question before. That's so weird.
Maybe.
I
guess the smaller dogs the better because then I can I can pick them up and kick them.
Yeah. You can take them. You can take them.
I can take them. Hey, those are the little evil bastards, aren't they?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
So your favorite breed is no breed at all, basically.
Yeah.
I love the corgis.
Oh, they're so cute.
Yeah, they're little stubby bodies, and they're full of so much personality. I mean, I think unfortunately the royal family in England has corgis, but I'll look past that and not let it taint my opinion. And
it's not the corgi's fault.
Yeah, not the corgi's fault. They're enslaved by that inbred reptilian family, but
exactly. That's awesome. I don't know. My favorite breed changes every day, but I love Cavapoos, which is a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel mixed with a poodle, and Airedales. Those are my 2. Those are in the running for my favorite right now. But I know we don't need a lot more fear than we already have right now with like the whole world just mobilizing towards Agenda 21. Via this like really, really bad cold that people might get if they're, already sick or whatever.
Or
But
maybe
what's
if they're wearing a mask.
Yeah, if they're wearing a mask, exactly. But what's the scariest thing before we get into the fun sort of spooky stuff tonight? What's the scariest real world thing you guys see going on today?
Well, I think the scariest thing in the world is people's compliance and everybody just being willing to allow anything in the name of safety and security and not being scared, I guess. I never thought people would be willing to give up so much.
Really good call. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just watching how unrooted people are. They just, everybody is so quick to knee-jerk react to literally just about anything. I mean, my God, you see people in the store. I mean, just from people with politics to something as simple as they don't read the sign on a display for like buy one kiwi, get one for $1. And they're like, oh, so they're $1. You know, and when they figure out they're not because they didn't read the sign, they freaking snap out. And you're standing there in the produce section buying your food like, is this 51-year-old man actually spazzing like this over something? Yeah. I mean, there's just no rootedness to people. There's no foundation to who they are. They're just blown on the wind of whatever situation is happening, and they have nothing to root themselves in. So, of course, all the pundits and demagogues just string them along.
Yeah, it's so easy to be controlled when you're like that. Those are a couple themes that came up in the recent tarot reading that I did for this coming November, actually, too, is just how unrooted people are and how easily that is to kind of shake and ruin everything in their life if you have no internal sort of fortitude. And anything can just kind of take you and, like you said, like almost puppet you along or push you around or whatever it is. Like, what are you? Well,
it's funny. Do? I was having a conversation with someone, and they were kind of talking about how crazy the world is, and I said, well, you know, I reflect upon the saying of Shantideva to where if the world's covered in thorns, you're not going to have enough soft leather to cover the world to make it easier to walk around. You need to just cover your own feet in leather and then walk through the world of thorns.
It's so simple. It's so true. I love it.
It is. It just,
all those pieces of wisdom like that are usually like, you're like, oh yeah, like duh. But you know, we have to obviously be told this over and over again because most of us don't get it.
I was just thinking that if there was ever a good time to like start a cult, it's right now. Not that I have any ideas or any inclinations, but if I do, this is the time to do it.
That's absolutely true.
If you look on the, just YouTube in general, there's dozens and dozens of actual cults that are rising right now that are led by people that are just absolutely shouldn't be in that position whatsoever. And actually overseas in various countries like Romania and Russia, in various places, there's huge cults that are forming around these cults of personality and people that are saying, I'm the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, we're talking like tens of thousands of followers that gather and just throw money and power and control at these people. It's pretty scary.
Hell, I heard Jared Leto did it.
That's exactly right. That's another one to where it's just mindless cultish worship of these personalities with no real meat on the bone. It's just skeleton, philosophy, really.
It's interesting too, because a lot of shows actually I noticed are like personalities behind shows like this show become like almost cult-like, and the followers of the show become sort of cult-like, where they don't question anything anymore. We're in this. This is our rank in the system. Like, this is how we get higher in the system. And it's really, really creepy. And I don't even know if anybody involved intends it, but it just like happens. It's almost like people are really looking for that, you know, sense of belonging and being told kind of how to be and what to do and what to think. And
yeah, your opinion is my opinion.
Yeah, and
you know,
that's why I love the Rogue community so much, is because the people who are attracted to this show, the people who tend to be in the chat and in the place like rogue.locals.com and Eyes Open, all the people that are attracted there tend to be really independent, free-thinking people. And like I said earlier, even if we don't agree, like that's a great thing. Like nobody's upset about it. We want to share information and ideas and whatever. And I like that. I hope it always stays that way. And if it doesn't, I might just, you know, kill it all. But so far, so good.
So far, so rogue.
Yes. Exactly.
Oh, you're wearing the perfect mask to do it.
Yes. So let's get to, how did you guys get to become paranormal investigators? Because this is like one of my secret dream jobs, but I don't even understand how you would ever do it. So what drew you to it and how did you get into it? And we'll start with Jay.
Sure. So this was a kind of a weird time in my life. I didn't really have a whole lot going on. I'd recently like broke off from my friend group that I had because they were really toxic people. And I was looking for something interesting to do. Like this was a time where I wasn't drinking. I was sober. And, you know, in a situation like that, you've got to fill your time. So this was probably about 10 years ago or so. So I went on like Craigslist and I was just looking for things. And I think I saw an ad about paranormal investigation, and I was drawn to it because at the time, and oddly, I still am kind of a skeptic, but at the time I was a skeptic, but I've always had like, I've always had my feet like all the way dipped into the pool of every kind of insanity. You know, when I was a little kid, I used to listen to Art Bell. I wouldn't sleep at night. I would just stay up all night listening to Art Bell. I remember that. I think the first time I ever listened to it was when he had an EVP session, and it just was such a mind blower to me. And I didn't believe it. I thought it was bullshit. But at the same time, I wondered, you know, what if it's not? And isn't this cool? And I remember I would always just be drawn to the bizarre. You know, I used to like to go into the bookstores and, you know, just little hole in the wall bookstores, and I'd find the ones with the good occult section, and I'd read all the dusty old books, and I'd read the craziest stuff I could find, and I wouldn't really believe it, but I'd kind of wonder. So when I saw this ad for it was called the Oregon Ghost Society. I was living in Portland at the time. I jumped on it. I was like, that sounds like a great hobby. You know, it'll fill up my time great. You know, when do you get in trouble? You know, when you're trying to live a clean life, it's at nighttime. It's after 10 o'clock. It's at 2 a.m. Well, yeah. You're not going to get in trouble when you're, you know, creeping around some old abandoned house or battleground or what have you with a bunch of people that are, you know, sure as hell aren't going to let you drink anything with these spirits and ghosts around.
Yeah.
So that was a really cool hobby for me, and I did it for a while until I moved away from the state. But we saw some really cool things, and I still had that skepticism, even when I really shouldn't have, when stuff was just staring me right in the face. But they liked that because they like having skeptics in the group. I think any paranormal group does, because it kind of grounds it, and you're not inventing things. You know, like you're not. You know, as soon as the lights go out, oh man, a ghost just grabbed me. or oh yeah, I can see it right now. I can see the spirit right there is calling to me. But you're actually going to have a impartial take on things, and you're really going to need to be convinced. So that's kind of how I got drawn into it. And in the time since, I haven't really done any official investigations or ghost huntings, but I've done some. You know, I've gone to places that are purported to be haunted or where there's supposed to be activity. I've gone on some of these tours and that sort of thing, and I've actually had some experiences that have happened that I guess we'll get to it later, that kind of really made me reevaluate things.
Oh, I can't wait to hear more about it. And I love that because it is true. If you're just a group of people who really wants to believe and wants to find evidence, then even if you are very analytical and critical and evidence-based, you can still kind of get carried away with things that you don't want to think too hard about the possible explanations. But if you're coming to it as a skeptic instead, then the things that you decide are like, wow, that was actually really weird. Those are going to be the ones that really like get people. That's awesome. And what about you, Alan? How did you get into it all?
Well, I can remember as far back as literally third and fourth grade, and there were a lot more books on the subject back then. It was a lot more open and free, talking about the crazy paranormal, and the elementary library was laced with these books. You could buy them, you could lend them out anytime you wanted. And I really just had a hankering for it, and of course loved paranormal horror movies. And the love just blossomed and continued. And then during teenage and 20s, I got together with like-minded people in the city of Ashland, Ohio, and we would go out and investigate places, not legally, but just go into places that were haunted and just investigate as much as we could, which had interesting experiences that happened early on. And then I met my co-investigator, Chris Boris, and we would brainstorm at our local BW3 over beer and wings and whatever. And we would just talk about like how we love the paranormal and how we could get in to do it from our viewpoint, which is a very grounded scientific, like Jay's talking about. And we're like, we can do this, obviously. And Chris has training at a college level in videography and editing and production. So he really knew how to do it that side. And we're like, well, let's just combine this together. And so we started gathering equipment, and we decided just to get together and do our first investigation, which was Mancy, the Mansfield Reformatory. And after that, and we made an actual show, Haunted Investigators, and it was ranked one of the premier ghost hunting shows on YouTube with insane views. So people were loving the content we were putting out because it was very grounded and methodic and scientific. And then it just grew from there, and it continued to go to more and more investigations. And we just finished up another one 2 weeks ago. Oh, wow. So we got back into it after a couple year hiatus, and now we're back into it again.
Oh, how cool. Yeah, I love that you both come at it from that angle of being logical and using, sort of whatever sort of methods that you use. So actually, if you want to each maybe tell us a few of the devices and or methods that you might use when you're doing things like this, just for people who aren't familiar, that would be really cool. I don't know, maybe Alan can start this time.
Oh gosh, well, there's if you would see the boxes we open up, I mean, it looks like a mad scientist lab in a briefcase. There are so many devices you can use, but ironically, one of the best devices is this old Panasonic recording device, which now goes for exorbitant amounts of money. But that's the best one to pick up electronic voice phenomena on EVPs. That old technology, there's just something about the old school stuff that just picks up on evidence that the newer, more high-fidangled stuff just kind of overlooks. There's also Ovulus device, which is a database of word dictionary that can be manipulated via energy, and the spirits can talk through it and pull up words in the database, which gets the results you get back, it's not like it's white noise. I mean, it's directly answering questions that you're asking them, and it's not just a random occurrence, especially with some of the words that are 3, 4, and 5 syllable long or whole sentences. And, you have to focus on having properly good cameras, and there's really neat devices. Like there's a puck device which sends out messages and they can be answered back via electronic device. And we've gotten some interesting results on that too. But Jay can probably tell you about like another 10 different items that we use. I'll let him continue.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of devices. I like what you said about the old school Panasonic though. Analog, and you hear this from people just when they're talking about music, like it's got a better quality than digital. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because there's something a little bit more tangible, oddly enough, to reach something that's intangible to us. Mm-hmm. But if you've got the patience for it, because it does take a lot of time. Just some of the best times that I had with investigations was just literally sitting in the room, asking questions, not hearing anything back, trying to make sure that you're in that right mind space and trying to find the right questions to ask to unlock the mysteries. Because that's the most intriguing part of it to me. It's not necessarily to find something and say, oh, cool, I saw something scary or I saw something unexplainable, but I always wanted to know, what's it like over there? Like, what's going on? What exactly are these phenomena? And EVP was my favorite. That was the first thing I heard when it came to investigation, ghost hunting, whatever you want to call it. And that's been my favorite. But I have really liked the evolution of it. My favorite actual device, and I guess you'd call it Ghost Box. It's kind of like an EVP in real time. So it's basically like a radio, and it scans across all the frequencies. And I guess the logic behind it is that from a spirit or what have you can make an imprint, or they can use the frequencies to kind of come through briefly and communicate. So the radio is just scanning through all the frequencies. It's just, and you're hearing like little snippets of each little radio station. But then every once in a while, something will break through, and you'll hear a little snippet of conversation that's clearly not part of the radio. And I actually had, we were doing an investigation in someone's house, actually, where they had a lot of activity. And that was the first time that I felt that there was something I couldn't explain, because I was asking questions and I was getting answers and it was happening in real time. And it was mind blowing. But yeah, there's other, there's temperature readers, where you can just kind of shoot, and take the temperature of the air, and you're looking for like a drastic change in temperature, like a cold spot, for instance. There's light fields. We would often put up, you probably do the same thing, Alan. You turn the lights off and it's just like a display of like a laser grid. And that's a really cool thing, because that's when you might actually see something visual, like maybe a shadow where there shouldn't be one. Electromagnetic pulse generators, I think they're called. A little device where you can create like an electromagnetic field, which is supposed to kind of give the spirits or the ghosts or whatever we're communicating with some fuel, some energy.
EMF pump.
EMF pump, yes. Have you ever used? I've seen this lately. It's since I haven't done any investigations since people started using this, but the Xbox, I think it's called the Xbox Connect. It's like
is that the one that has the grid of the stick figure that it picks up on? Yeah. We just used that at the Patterson Tower investigation, and that's an incredible device. I mean, that one, the first time I saw that used was on Ghost Adventures, and it will literally pick up on the physical form of a being that's there that you can't see. Wow. And you can see a literal stick figure, and you can, and it happens in real time, and you can say, hey, I can see you. Can you lift your left arm? And the figure will lift its left arm.
What?
And so it's not like up to random chance whatsoever. And I just want to mention, someone in the chat said that they got one of those Panasonic recorders and they paid $1,100 for it.
Wow. And I wonder how much it was brand new, like at the time. You know, like that's amazing.
Someone bought it for $30 in the 90s.
Yeah.
Right. Good
They're
investment.
just like, wow, I got rich.
Yeah.
But so anything that can, and we're starting to see more and more technology that most of it's just pretty much at least all of the equipment that I used was not originally intended for this purpose, except for maybe the Ghost Box. I don't think that was originally intended for anything else, but it was a repurposed radio. But when people didn't invent a tape recorder with the intention of communicating with the dead, they didn't invent an Xbox with the intent of being able to have a spirit come through and basically manifest for you. And I've even seen like something as simple as like these filters that you see on the apps, like on Snapchat, where like it'll take your face and it'll put like a puppy dog face or some goofy cartoon on you or whatever, but it's sensing your face. And us conspiracy minded people were thinking, what is the CNSA trying to map our our face or put us in a database or what have you. But the cool thing is it's detecting your eyes and your nose and a mouth, and it knows where there's a face. Well, I've seen people that are just goofing around on the Snapchat trying to make that puppy dog face show up or trying to do like a face swap with their sister or something. And all of a sudden it will detect a face that's where you don't see one.
Wow.
and it's kind of similar to like that Xbox where it's just meant to read where there's a person with a body so you can, do your video game. And I don't know exactly how it works. I don't have one, but you're manipulating the video game character and it's reading your arms and your legs and your torso. And then all of a sudden it's reading the arms and the legs and torso for somebody that's not there as far as you can see.
Yeah. Right
next to you. And if
it's not like that there's a similar pattern. It's not like there's a stick with like 4 lines coming off it and a block at the top or something. It's just like nothing is there and it's picking up something. That's insane.
Yeah, nothing that we can see. And yet, if you bring in other investigating tools into the equation, you might be able to pick something up. Like you might get an EVP that will correlate with that Snapchat face or that Xbox stick figure.
Yeah, really, I think the foundation of technology being used to communicate with the dead really goes back to Thomas Edison, who made a basically like a spirit device to talk to spirits in the 1800s. In 1920, he was interviewed with the American magazine talking about it.
Wow.
So there's the whole spiritualism movement, which started in the 19th century, really brought this to the forefront. Though a lot of those people were shams and frauds, it's still, one of the biggest critics of these people was Houdini, and Houdini actually wanted to write a book about the paranormal, and what he found was credible and very much a lot of uncredible stuff.
And he's kind of probably drawing attention to the fact that with kind of misdirection and our mind's ability to sense patterns and kind of project meaning, like you can misinterpret a lot of things that can otherwise be explained away pretty rationally. But I find it amazing that this is actually like, it was so normal then, like you were saying, that spiritualist movement, and it's like everybody was into it and like trying to have like Ouija boards or seances or all these things. And before that, people maybe even like worshiped their ancestors or talked to their ancestors and the ghosts of their ancestors and accepted that there were spirits everywhere. And this is actually the only time in history, I think, where it's normal to believe that there's nothing like that and there's no chance of it, despite this evidence that you guys are talking about, which is kind of undeniable. I'm sure if you go do it yourself, it's even more so, and yet we're living in this time where like no one will, not no one, but you know what I mean? It's not acknowledged, it's ignored.
Well, Yeah, we're a lot more insulated from death. When you look at like in the 19th century, people were so close to death because there was so much of it. There was youth mortality that was out of control. With the industrialization of the world, and we hadn't quite gotten our heads wrapped around how to do that without people dying left and right.
And you couldn't just separate yourself from it. Like that dead body's in your house until you can bury it, and you have to.
There's a reason. There's a front room and a living room that the terms used to be used, because you would have a viewing area for the corpse, because you would bury the body on your land, and then or buried next to the religious institutions, and then for purposes of sanitation, which became so prevalent in the ongoing expansion of cities, that's where they created the graveyards and cemeteries that were outside the city limits, so the bodies could not contaminate water sources and the local area and the land, the water table, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why the bodies were moved away. And also with the incurrence of, and I don't mean to shine a negative light on them, the funeral industry, they kind of took a hand in controlling the disposal and dealing with the body, as opposed to where the family or religious institutions were. So that separated us again, putting another middleman in between. And of course, a lot of this was involved in that. And really, that came to the forefront because of the Civil War.
Yeah. I see you guys always take it somewhere miraculously genius and interesting, so it's awesome. But that is definitely, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Alan, about people just being ungrounded now. We're ungrounded because we're disconnected from our roots. And that's part of it, like what you just described and what you were saying, Jay. Like, we used to be closer to death, and we're not now.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that frankly unifies us all. I mean, it's like the saying goes, what is it? We can death and taxes. Everybody. Yeah. Well, not everybody pays taxes, but there's not everybody on this planet's going to die, and millions and billions of people before us have. But in this day and age, I mean, you can go. I mean, besides some elderly people in my family growing up, I mean, I didn't know anybody that died until I was like 30 years old. And I don't think that anybody would be saying that 100 years ago. But I don't think anybody would be saying that in 1920, when we'd just gone through a massive war and an actual worldwide pandemic that actually killed millions and millions of people.
A real one, you mean?
You don't have to see a dead body. You don't have to be near it. You can avoid it. You can get to damn near 50 years old while still thinking you're immortal. but we're not. And
one of the unrealistic things that people have been programmed with because of the funeral industry is an embalmed body. It looks like, somewhat still looks like you're just, grandpa's sleeping. Oh, he looks like he's asleep. It's like, no, this is what grandpa should look like, with stuff oozing off of him. The body's puffed up, and then the parents saying, this is what's going to become of you, little Johnny, sooner or later, so you better, this is reality. And there's been massive studies with children, and even at an early age, 3, 4, 5, and 6, children can still grasp the understanding of the little ladybug in your hand is not going to wake up. Yeah. It's gone forever,
I was just thinking about the moment where I really understood what death was for the first time, and I was about 5 or 6. And, they told me my dog died. I found him and I tried to wake him up and he wouldn't wake up. I was like, Mom, the dog won't wake up. She's like, oh, yeah, like, okay, you go over there, And then eventually they were like, come out, we're, Ouija, his name was Ouija. Ouija is dead. And I was like, okay, cool. We go out and they're like digging the hole. And I'm like, word. And he's just laying there, I'm like, he's like asleep or whatever. It's some kind of weird, like, death. Who cares? And then they threw him in the ground and started putting dirt on him. And I fucking lost my mind. I was like, what are you doing to him? And they're like,
how's he going to get out?
Right. right? And they're like, no,
that doesn't
what
happen
that
on the
is.
Looney Tunes, right?
Right. But it is,
Well,
I
and-
mean, as difficult as it is for any of us to learn what death is I think it's very positive to understand what that is, because it makes you value life more. And it's just, it makes you understand life. If you don't even understand what life is, what's the point of any of this, you know?
Well, and the people, regardless of your philosophical or religious or spiritual tradition or cultural geographic location, it's so easy to just tell the child, look, there's an essence inside of the being that you just lost, your pet Fluffy. It's left and it's moved on. This is just the body. The animal you loved is still alive, but it's just in a different form. And you can pretty much tell a child that no matter what your tradition. Now, the difference is, which is one of the problems we have in the culture right now, is the scientific materialists who feel there is no life after death, which
and then they feel like they're lying if they say that to their kids, so they don't tell them anything. They're like, yep, they're just dead. Deal with it.
Right.
Like,
and I mean, and I'm sorry, but I can tell you that as a degreed thanatologist who has studied death intensely for years, and all of the research involved in it and all the case studies, that if these scientists would focus their analytical minds on the consciousness being non-locality, like we did in the one episode, they would see that the evidence is overwhelming, that there is something beyond just this material flesh, the material that makes up the body. But they are just as much a belief cult as other ones are that say science isn't a fact. So they're just as fanatical as other people. They just do it in a way that they feel, in a very hubris way, that they know the truth, and this is the only way that it is, which really their way brings no hope to people.
See, here we are talking about cults again.
It all comes full circle. No, I'd say that, I mean, the cult of scientism, of materialism, I mean, that is even more fanatical than any kind of a religious or spiritual belief, because you don't feel that faith is involved. You feel that you have all of the answers, when, I mean, that's the opposite of what science means. But if you think that you know everything, and you think that you can prove that you know everything, and it's not just some faint faith that you have, as much as you may believe it, then, I mean, that's a pretty strong thing to change.
That's an absolutely great point. Well, I want to mention some things that people have said in the chat that are very interesting. Sergio shared that he was using the DR60, I think that same device that we were talking about earlier that's so expensive, in a quiet room on voice activated mode, and got some things that were hard to make out, but one time got spirit screaming, which sounds terrifying. And then someone else said,
well, if a spirit realizes you can hear them and they are in distress, what would you do? You'd scream to the person like, I'm terrified, I don't know what's going on, but at least you can hear me somewhat.
Yeah, and then that makes me sad, and maybe that can be the next question is what? Well, I'll write it down for later. Actually, I won't even say it yet. But I also liked Decatus said, I wonder if I can record myself when my pineal is open. So if you're in like a quiet room and you have it recording and you're trying to sort of like talk to it, do you guys think that would be possible?
I like the thought. So basically, almost like recording your like as an EVP, like recording your second self or your subconscious or your astral form. I mean, just not a separate entity. I mean, have you ever heard of anybody picking anything like that up?
Well, what it would basically be is them rolling the tape and then letting their just free thought go when they're in that altered state of consciousness. And then when they maybe would come out of it, they could go back to the tape, reflect upon what they said, and it might be something very eye-opening to them that they've never heard themselves say or think about or go through. I mean, if someone's doing something like, ingesting DMT or another consciousness altering chemical, it would be good to lay down a recorder like that to record anything that you might say that comes to your mind, or verbalizing the experience while it's actually happening. So it would be kind of like a security net to be able to capture the moment that when you come out of it, you're not as easily able to tap into it. But during the process, it would be a good thing to be able to record.
Yeah, you can tap into some things like you mentioned, like if you're in an altered state. It's a little bit off topic, but that question made me think about reverse speech. I don't know if you've ever looked into reverse speech.
I've been trying to get David Oates on this show for years.
Yeah. Reverse speech is awesome. So basically, and we all do it. Everybody does it. Probably right now, we're probably saying things and we don't even realize it.
I'll be right back.
I'm probably saying like, I love everyone, la, la, la.
Possibly, who knows? But, you can take a recording of somebody talking, and then if you play it backward, it could be saying a number of things. Sometimes it's congruent, where you're just saying the same thing, but maybe in different words, which means, you're being very honest at the time or what have you. Sometimes you're saying things that are tapping into something, just kind of like Alan mentioned, like with DMT or a substance like that, where you're tapping into something and it's something real and you're accessing information that you shouldn't have access to. Like I've seen reverse speech where they'll play it backwards and they'll predict something that's going to happen in the future. And it might be something as simple as, oh, my glass is going to fall down. And then his glass falls down a minute later.
Wow.
Or it might be something as, as crazy as, 5 years from now, and then, 9/11 happens. I think I've actually seen something like that in a reverse speech.
You're making me want to listen to my voice on reverse and see what kind of things it's saying. And then I hope I'm not cutting you off, but I want to ask you guys too, since we're talking about reverse speech and spirits, do you think it's hard for them? Do you think they're like actually speaking in reverse and they have to try to make it forwards way so that they can, that's why it's like so hard to get anything clearly? Like, what if we played shit in backwards and then it was like, holy shit, they're really clear now?
Well, we get clear responses all the time. When you get involved in investigating, see, when we approach the spirit, it's basically just another human being, hopefully, that is without a body. So already you have the trauma of not being physical anymore. And you just have to think what the person's going through. And many times they're reticent to communicate because they've never had anybody sit down and listen to them while they're just floating around in, like, let's say, some house that they haunt. And when they actually get a chance to speak, they'll speak many times. When we did season 2, Pursuit of the Paranormal, we went to St. Augustine Lighthouse and we had a conversation with the spirit for 90 minutes.
Wow. That's awesome. So they're like, okay, let me dictate this book to you now that someone's finally listening. Because even when we're alive, it can be very challenging to find people who actually listen to you. So I can imagine it's worse when you're dead, if that's what you're interacting with. But let's actually get into stories. Do you want to tell us about that story, Alan? And then Jay can share an exciting story with us as well.
Sure. We went to the St. Augustine Lighthouse in St. Augustine, Florida. And there's a spirit of one of the daughters of the lightkeeper, Eliza, that passed away there. And she's very attached to one of the younger tour guides of the lighthouse who we had stick with us. So she would be more open to communicate with us. Wow. And we used what's called a K2 meter, which can be make the lights go up and down in a very strong way or a very weak way, depending upon the yes and no questions that you ask. So we sat down with our cameramen and we sat in a room with this gentleman also and asked Eliza, we want to talk to you about what it's like on the other side. And we just started asking a lot of yes and no questions. And we were getting into things like, are there rules that you have to follow that you can't talk about? Bam, it would hit. Wow. And sometimes we would get to areas of asking such in-depth questions that she would leave. And we could feel the room like being sucked out of the energy of the room. And it's like, okay, she's not answering. She's not here anymore. And then we would wait a little bit and we would apologize to her and say, we're sorry we made you mad. Did you not want to answer that question? You know, bam. And then we would start going back into asking questions again. And this went on for 90 minutes. It's one of the longest communications, I think, so far on camera with a spirit for a ghost investigation crew. But it was very interesting. And you can, I think the video is floating around the net somewhere. You can watch the investigation and see the actual conversation in the edited form with the best parts.
Oh,
no, I definitely want to see that. That sounds awesome.
That sounds super awesome.
It was eye-opening.
Did they give you a like, did you get a sense of what it's like from their perspective? I've always wondered that. I've never really gotten a good answer.
Yeah. What did you learn?
It's almost like they have a knowledge somewhat of what's going on, and they're kind of, it's very peculiar. I mean, I don't want to say it's like Beetlejuice with like a manual of what you're supposed to do in the afterlife, but it ironically is somewhat a little like that for a lot of the spirits, and they know they've passed. Not all of them. Some of them are wandering spirits. Some of them are very confused spirits. They're just like human beings. They're really, when you're dealing with a spirit, if you go at it from a psychological standpoint of like, okay, well, let's talk about the fact that you don't have a body anymore. Is there something you want to get off your chest? Is there a reason you're hanging around? They have all the same emotional drives that we do. They just have to manifest it in a non-corporeal way, though they can manifest with like moving and breaking things and making noises and appearing and everything like that. So I mean, it's just like interacting with another person. You just have the creepy factor of the fact like, oh, this is a disembodied spirit that's appearing to me who's been dead for 100 years. Once you get over that hump of, oh, hey, there's so-and-so standing in the hallway while we're having a conversation, get a picture really quick. There's certain rules that they're not supposed to talk about certain things. And I even asked her, well, where are you located? Are you next to someone? Are you floating above us? Oh, I'm floating above you. So it was just like you would see in a movie where they were just hovering above us, looking down on a group and talking with us through the devices.
Wow.
Awesome. Almost like I guess we can kind of experience that if we're doing projection.
Yep. Oh, sure. Yeah. Same thing. Astral projection. Yeah. Same thing. Or being in our dream state is another type of a non-corporeal existence where we can manifest through focus and directing our energy. And that's kind of what the spirits do, is if they have enough focus, they can project the energetic body they have to affect the material world, which is where you get doors closing, footsteps happening, speaking to people. Some of the spirits, like at Mansi, you can have reoccurring smells. You know, if a person loves cigars, they can smoke a cigar in the afterlife and they will sit there and you will smell the cigar literally in a whole block of an area and there's nobody smoking.
I've experienced that one before. We did a lot of, and I don't really know how I feel about it now, because in retrospect, I don't feel like I was actually an expert, and I felt like at times people would treat us as if we were. But we did a lot of investigations at like people's homes. You know, like they'd reach out and they'd say, you know, that they're having activity or they feel their home's haunted, or, you know, in some cases they would actually feel like there was like dark activity that was oppressing them or that was preying on their kids or anything like that. And then when I think about it, I'm like, well, geez, we were just kind of putzing around these people's houses with equipment trying to get a reading.
Yeah.
But a lot of things that I did experience were in like a residential setting like that.
Yeah.
And I remember one where it was one of the only times where I actually saw something. I saw, it wasn't like I didn't actually like see a person, I didn't see a form, but I saw like a shadow moving. And
was it out the corner of your eye?
It was, I can't remember if it was, I feel like it was almost like front on, but passing by. And it couldn't have been anything else, because one of the first things that you do when you're doing an investigation is you kind of get like a base level. You'll check out the place before the lights are turned off. You'll check out the place before you're actively looking for something to make sure, okay, this is the sound that the refrigerator makes, or the
plumbing.
The plumbing and things like that. This is what the temperature is. This is what the K2 meter does when I'm just walking around the house and I'm trying to communicate with anything. And it was a pretty much a condition where there couldn't have been something running by. Like there wasn't like somebody's cat in the house or anything like that. And it was in somebody's kitchen. And in that kitchen, I remember it smelled like cooking breakfast. It smelled like somebody cooking like bacon and eggs. and I can assure you, nobody was cooking anything when this happened. It was like 2 a.m. we were alone in this house, the group that was investigating. And then, I see this shadow, like a shadow. I won't say a shadow figure, but I see like a moving shadow, and I smell like the smell of like a Denny's.
Wow.
And one of the things with, energy is amazing what it can do. And you can have areas that are saturated with what's called a residual haunting. And it's basically like a tape player that just repeats itself. And some things can trigger it, or it just does it on its own. So sometimes you can smell certain things, hear certain things happen in the atmosphere. And it's basically like the area is saturated with something that has happened, and it's just repeating on cycle now. So there's no consciousness involved in it. So there is no somewhat real communication going on. There's no will behind it. It's kind of operating on autopilot.
So it's almost like, it sounds like when there's spirit entities or like ghosts, maybe that maybe there's like a reason they're here. And we actually have someone in the chat, Chuck Landman, who has been a paranormal investigator for, I think he said 10 years as well. So he should have been on this episode with us as well. But he was saying, sometimes you need to maybe help them sort of have closure or kind of realize like why, or even that they are sort of passed on. And I wonder what you guys think about that. And then if it is that residual one, where it just seems like it's just repeating over and over, and it's just something sort of in the area rather than a consciousness, is there also something that maybe we can do or should do, or you guys think you could do or want to do for that to sort of clear it and release it so it's not just constantly spitting this out? Like, is there something you can do for both, or what do you guys think about interacting with that at all, or do you just leave it be?
I think with the residual haunting, and I mean, there's so many different variations of this type of phenomena. There's no way to say that anything for certain. There's no certainty in this field. But my feeling with residual hauntings is I think somebody said it in the chat. It might have been Chuck, where it's almost like the earth recorded something that transpired at that location, and you hear a lot about this when it comes to something traumatic like a war, where you're going to see the exact same scene play over and over and over. Nothing changes. You can't interact. You're going to see the soldier, getting shot or shooting the cannon off or whatever the case may be. You're going to see and in some cases it goes back a long time. Like I've heard of residuals in Europe where you'll see Roman soldiers marching, and they're not even at the same level because the earth is not at the same level as it was 1500 1600 years ago, to where you might see them and it looks like they're like their torsos in the ground. Wow. Because they're marching wherever they were marching, in 400 AD or whenever it would have been. So I almost feel like it's just something happened with so much energy that the earth recorded it. I don't quite understand exactly how it works, but there's some really interesting ones, and there's some really mundane ones as well, where it's like you might just see somebody walking down the stairs, and there's no great story about it. In some cases, you might not even know if they're actually dead. I've heard of people seeing like members of their household. Like they'll look in their backyard and they'll see their dad, working in the garden or something, and then he'll walk through the front door.
And it's like maybe that's kind of the astral projection thing, and maybe that explains. Oh my God, what's that called? Doppelganger.
Doppelganger.
Yeah.
Now that's the doppelgangers are very creepy. There's actually and I know I'm getting off the question, but I just want to follow this up really quick. There's actually proof of a doppelganger where this woman's doppelganger followed her around even on a college campus, and they took pictures of it, and it would go to classes. Yeah, the students were so unnerved by this that they basically had to just kind of tell her to stop coming because it was so unnerving to see a duplicate of this person interacting with people, talking with them, or whatever.
They're like, girl, we're gonna murder you. Like, you need to get out of here.
Well, that's one of the theories is the doppelganger wants to take over your persona and get rid of you.
I've got some ideas when it comes to, like, one is that maybe it's a parallel dimension or parallel universe or what have you. I'd be curious if, like in the instance that you just mentioned, Alan, if those interactions were interactions that she had at another point in the past or in the future, or if they're completely independent of her own timeline. Yeah. And if they're independent of the own timeline, then it's like, maybe a parallel universe, maybe some kind of a mimic, some kind of, beyond spirits, but maybe we're getting in the realm of demons or something along those lines.
Well, it also plays. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that one doesn't seem very benevolent. The doppelganger seems kind of malevolent.
Well, it is. It's a predatorial being that wants to basically use you as a vehicle. And actually, it also gets into, and I just did a video on my YouTube channel about tulpas, which is a Tibetan term of Namanikaya, which is about thought forms and projected thought forms out of the mind that manifest into a physical reality of actually creating duplicates of yourself or creating thought forms of other beings or things. And some people can have such untapped reservoirs of psychic energy that if they go through something traumatic or some type of neuroses is happening, they can actually create and manifest things or beings or duplicates of themselves, and they don't even know they're doing it. In the 1970s, there was a lot of research on poltergeist, which just means a noisy spirit. And they found that a lot of times in the instances where there was a lot of paranormal activity and the noisy spirit was throwing things at the house or knocking things around, there was normally a kid, usually a female, that was going through puberty, and their unrestrained energy was manifesting outside, causing mayhem. And once they went through puberty, it stopped.
Yeah, I know. I've heard the same thing, and I've also heard people that are in a situation where maybe they're being abused, or maybe somebody that's maybe somebody that's like a kidnapping victim that's been captured. It's almost like you're projecting forth energy, and it manifests in a way, and it's not done. I don't think it's done consciously. I think it's done subconsciously, to where your mind sets you to a different place, and it's just like with the tulpa, where if you put enough energy and enough thought into creating something, it can take form. And maybe that's where a lot of the spirits come from, because. Yeah. And I'm going to get us off subject again, but I was kind of curious what your thoughts were on reincarnation, and why, because I believe reincarnation. I've seen a lot of evidence of it, like with the children that remember past lives, and there's direct evidence that you can't deny. Yeah. Like they remember the fighter plane that they were in and that they got shot down on, and they can recall details that that a 3-year-old kid wouldn't have access to. How do we reconcile a world where there's reincarnation and there's also ghosts of people that once were alive?
Ooh, can I go?
Well, I was gonna also go back to what your original the question was about cleansing and helping spirits move on. That's something that I, of course, also focus on doing as a priest monk in my tradition. So there's a lot of chants, there's a lot of rituals, there's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of means of helping these beings move on and go to where they're supposed to move on to, and let go of their worldly connection and go to the spirit realm to either move to a higher plane or to a lower plane for a lot of people, which is why they don't want to move on, because of the fear and trepidation of what's going to happen to them because of a life that they led. And that's why they don't want to relinquish staying here amongst the living, or they crave so much a body, which is why reincarnation happens many times. And there's actual ways and chants and mantras that can reverberate and cleanse an area, unless it's so, like he said, saturated that you literally have to destroy the house and preferably obliterate and burn all of the components of the house, and don't use it in like another house, because that energy can go to the next building where those pieces and parts came from. If you look at the car James Dean died in, they melted it down and used it in other things, and then things happened to those people that had those objects also.
There was like 3 different car crashes after that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't get why James Dean was so special, because he also met like Sai Baba as he was dying or something, or he was saved by Sai Baba and didn't die, but then died later. But I wanted to say too about the reincarnation thing is that for my own times that I've remembered aspects of my past lives, they've always been incredibly, like, horrifyingly traumatic and never positive at all. And
you weren't a Egyptian princess like everybody claimed?
Right. No, it was always like very either mundane or, well, both. It was both mundane and then also something completely horrifying that I don't even like to say out loud was happening every single time. And so I imagine that the reason why I'm remembering that is because it still needs to be healed. And so I try to do healing work around that. And I imagine then too, now that we're talking about it, I've never thought of this part before, but perhaps until I healed that was like a ghost somewhere. Like maybe that bit of consciousness was sort of stuck there in time or space or both. And so therefore, like, healing it kind of releases it, which goes back to our sort of question that I don't know if we ever answered, which is, do you guys think you can sort of heal these energies, or that we should, or should we kind of leave it alone? Because someone in the chat also, and it might have been, it was either Chuck or Matt Feynman, I think it was Chuck, saying that perhaps if you intercede in this and help like a spirit move on or release some of these energies, that maybe negative entities or maybe some sort of like spiritual police like come and almost attack you because you like weren't supposed to, or just like wasn't time, or you know what I mean? Like, do you think that might happen, or what are your thoughts on that process?
What I have in my, and I've been doing this 38 years. So what I have found is, if you have the ability to help these spirits move on, what happens is you attract things that are feeders, and things that are negative entities that feed on harm and torture and inflicting pain upon these other beings, and they don't like the fact that you can release beings from being harmed and tortured still.
It's
and
like
so
an
they
energy source for them.
Right. And so they're almost like, well, I've got to go towards this guy because he's obviously got something he can do for these beings. Or I don't like the fact that, like, for instance, you might have a being that anchors 2 or 3 or 4 spirits to a location, and the being's not human, and it's feeding on these spirits being locked into this area and cycling through the hauntings. And so when you release these spirits, you really piss off this entity, and then it comes after you because you have a way to stop its feeding on these other beings who don't have physical form and need to move on so they can go to whatever their next station in life is.
Sounds a little bit risky. Yeah, I mean, it's making enemies that aren't human. I'd be worried that they'd follow me.
Don't try this at home unless you are perhaps very practiced and trained and ready and understand the consequences and processes and all of those sort of tools at your disposal spiritually and whatnot. But even if you're just kind of interacting with these like spirits, these ghosts or whatever, and counseling them, I feel like maybe you can be of some help without getting attacked too much. Maybe I still don't think anyone should just go out and.
Well, it's far and few between. I mean, Hollywood makes it act like it's happening every time, but it's many times it's just very mundane. Like, oh, hey, my name's Bob, and I've been, dead for 30 some years, and I just don't feel like I want to move on. I want to stay in this house. And it's like, well, if you're going to live with the living, you need to follow some guidelines, and you've got to lay down rules for them to stay in the proximity of the family who lives in a house now. It's like, this isn't your house anymore. This family's here now. You either need to be respectful and live with them or move on. And then the family sits down and confronts the spirit about their behavior and what they've been doing.
You hear you see a lot of those types of situations too, where it's like, we'll kind of come to an agreement, like, okay, don't scare the kids. Don't make a bunch of noise at 3 a.m. We don't mind if you're here. Just kind of, kind of stay in your place. Like, we all have spiders in our house, and most of us don't mind until one's crawling on your face in the middle of the night.
That's a good point. It's a good analogy. Right now, I have spiders everywhere all the time, and well, I guess everyone does. It's fall, but
they're definitely here. But I don't want to see them.
Yeah. And speaking of malevolent and benevolent entities, Matt Feynman asked in the chat whether in your guys' experiences are most of the things you encounter benevolent or malevolent?
They're just like normal people. They just don't have a body.
There's always going to be a few dick bags in the bunch.
Well, sure. Like they're just like normal people. Now I do know we went to if I may, tell about. So we went to a place called Longwood Manor, and unbeknownst to us, because we meant a wall of silence about this manor, and later on we found out that there was a lot of very dark satanic rituals that were involved in this manor.
Yikes!
When we were there, which I became profusely ill at that house. And ended up with pneumonia with black, coughing up black. And when we were in the basement, so they were investigating the basement, and there was supposed to be a child entity down there. And they asked, do you want to play with this ball that they had? No, was the answer on the EVP. And then they got this almost gremlin sounding thing growling on tape, and the cameraman got scratched and started bleeding.
Jeez.
So when something can physically assault you and make you bleed, you're dealing with something that's on a level that can manifest so much energy that it can actually, cause physical harm. So there's some things out there that when you get involved with it, it's very nasty. And You don't want those things sticking around, but you know, it you have to look at the history of what brought it there. Was it summoned? Was sacrifice involved? There's a lot of stuff you get into where you start dealing with very negative occult practices and rituals that can manifest things that shouldn't really be on this earth but are here now. And it takes a little bit to figure out what's going on and how you get rid of it. But you know, there's traditions that are thousands of years old that have dealt with these entities for 25, 3,000 years. So it's not like it's something new for these traditions. So there are recipes and mantras and chants and prayers and rituals that can be done to purify, exorcise, and get rid of beings that you don't want around. And there's certain people that go through training, you know, like an exorcist or whatever, that have the skills to do the battle with these entities. And it is a personal choice to get involved in this warfare. But if somebody's not doing it, then the tides are going to just roll in with entity after entity. So it's a life choice, but you know, it is a rewarding life choice in the end.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. From my experience, and I know that there certainly are evil, malicious, very, very dark entities. I don't know how many of them were once people.
Good point.
But I know that that's certainly something that you can risk playing with, you know, when you dabble in this. But from my experience, I haven't really come across a lot of negativity. 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, it's just mundane. You know, one of the ones that comes to mind was one of the first times. I think I mentioned it when I was when I used the ghost box, and I was able to kind of talk in real time with an entity, with a spirit. And for some reason, I asked what his favorite football team was, or his favorite sports team, and it said Packers. So
Yes.
So it's just like,
you're like fist bump.
It's like regular people, you know. I mean, some people are a little nastier than others. Some people are dicks sometimes. Some people, you know, they like to mess with you. But most people aren't evil. Most people aren't killers. Most people aren't gonna try to assault you. But with that said, I did have one experience where it was very, very dark, and it's one I won't forget. So this was in a city called St. Helens, Oregon. It's this little town. It's probably about an hour outside of Portland, and it's supposedly a very, very haunted city. I think that they like kind of like Alan mentioned. You know, it's like a city where they get really into Halloween. They do multiple Halloween parades every year, and they do the ghost walks, and that's basically the local economy is spookiness. But we went to this old, because it was like a saloon. It was like an old West town, like in the during like the gold rush times in the 1800s. I think it was like it was almost Portland, because it was on a river, and it was getting people going there for the gold rush or whatever the case may be. But we went to this hotel that used to be a saloon back in the 19th century. And, you know, there was a bar and there was like, you know, boarding house and everything else there. And they didn't tell us anything about it. They just told us, hey, explore this place. You might find some activity. And when we went there, we found all kinds of activity. Like the meters were going off the charts. We had, I can get into it, but let me just get to the point. So the craziest part was when we went into the basement of this place that used to be this saloon in the Old West, basically. And when we got there, all of the females in our group got extremely ill, like sick to the stomach, violently ill, vomiting, just very, very, and it was only the females. I didn't feel anything. I mean, it was creepy. It was an old basement from an old building that was falling apart, but I didn't feel anything. It was just an old, dark, cold basement. But the women were just violently violently ill. Well, later on, what we found out was at one point, this was like basically a bordello. So the people going out there, the cowboys or the gold miners or whatever, the guys going out there trying to pan for gold, they would go there and they would buy their prostitutes and they would sleep with their prostitutes there. Well, this is the 19th century. They didn't really have modern medicine. So when the prostitutes got pregnant, they took them down to that basement and they forced them to have abortions. It was like some real horrible way of doing it too. And it's probably like somehow that energy, because we didn't know any of this. We had no idea. We found out later because it was one of these investigations where they'll fill you in on everything later. So you can't just say, oh, I was expecting this, so this is what I saw. And it was almost like the women in our group were attacked by some kind of energy that was left over from that time or tied to it. And there was a lot of other stuff that happened on that investigation, some things that I experienced as well. But I thought that was one that really struck me as being something that felt malicious, something that felt evil.
Yeah. And like Alan said, maybe there's something like kind of keeping them, that energy there, like feeding off of it almost like, ugh.
And as for mundane things, like we went to the oldest jail in St. Augustine, and we had the ghost box out that was going through the white noise and it could pull off words. And I said, is there anybody here that was an inmate? And a name came through. And I said, okay. I go, well, what were you put in jail for? And literally over the voice box, it said embezzlement.
Wow.
So it's just, it's like, oh, okay. So-and-so was put here for embezzlement. Okay, that makes sense. And you're not going to get a random word like that to pop through a radio when you ask an exact question like, well, what were you in jail for? So that's when you're dealing with something that's thinking and, wants to tell its tale.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Well, this is a random jump, but someone asked in the chat, Sergio asked if you guys have any thoughts on the spiritual significance of the number 3. And, like 3 a.m. is the witching hour, supposedly, and things seem to happen in threes. Like you'll get scratches on your arms, and there's always 3 of them. Do you have any ideas about that, or did you experience anything?
3 knocks.
Yeah, did you get?
You'll hear that? 3 knocks with a demon or something along those lines.
Like, are you saying every time you hear 3 knocks, it is a demon, or you'll ask?
Well, I think that's what I've heard.
Okay.
Yeah, I might be misremembering, but that's what I seem to remember.
What about you, Alan?
Well, if you look at the history of the Trinity, it's in most world traditions, and I think when you get into the aspect of thought forms, that certain things can be ingrained culturally and historically in a large swath of the geography in this world. And so many people believe in the Trinity that it takes on literally a life of its own. And then because it kind of picks up speed like a juggernaut, it then starts affecting more things in the process as it's moving along, like a rolling snowball gaining momentum and snow as it moves along. So I think it's kind of like that chicken or egg argument, like you don't know which one comes first. Was the Trinity you're dealing with an ancient thing, or is it something new, or is it just a manifestation of so many people believing in a Trinity or various forms of Trinity? And it's also, you look at the perfect triangle that has the exact angles on each corner. That's, you get into geometry, which can also be a foundation of mathematics as well.
Good answer.
And math can get into magic.
So that reminds me too that, like you were talking about 3 it's like embedded in everything. Every aspect of everything has 3 embedded in it somehow. Like there's, yes, no, and neither. There's off, on, and neither or both. There's, I don't know, heaven, earth, and hell. It's just like everything that we can think of has electrons, neutrons, protons. Everything is a trinity. for whatever reason.
Maybe it's part of the DNA that that constructs our world. I feel like in a lot of cases there's something behind everything that we can see. There's something behind our experience that kind of ties everything together, maybe it's a reflection of that. Yeah, like the Matrix.
Well, and I've heard it too. It just came to mind that somebody had said at some point that maybe it's the 3 a.m. thing. At least that's a time of the night or the day, the early morning in your area, wherever you are, whatever 3 a.m. is happening for you. Most people are asleep and almost nothing is happening. Most animals are kind of asleep, and it's just a time that maybe those spirits can get your attention easier or interact more because it's sort of so quiet and there's not a lot of distractions, and maybe there's something to that too.
Maybe that's just when we notice it because of there's no interference.
True, because I pick up on things that I don't even want to. Like I've been having nightmares lately, and they're not really nightmares for me because I'm like, okay, so you're trying to kill my family, like get out of my dream, but it's been happening this last week, and I think it's just ramping up to all this election bullshit that people are like freaking out, and I think I'm just like, it's like seeping into my dreams. It's like annoying, but so it makes sense that if you have less of that going on coming at you, you could perceive something more subtle, like this. But you guys have sort of talked about maybe ghosts, maybe sort of the imprints in the land, maybe some sort of darker and demonic energies. Are there any other types of or like categories of sort of spiritual entities that you may have encountered or that you've heard of?
I'm trying to think. We've talked about so many.
Yeah, maybe we've already covered them all.
I don't think we've covered them all. There's no. Well, how about this? How about aliens? Have you ever heard of an alien ghost?
Like an actual ghost of an alien?
Yeah, a ghost of an alien. Wow. Why not?
Yeah, supposedly in Area 51, a story got out that there was a person that was in the infirmary there, and they were seeing the ghost of an alien walking around and was actually having conversation with it. It was stuck there. And why not? Yeah. But I know, and this is getting into some more darker stuff that I've had to deal with at my house where I used to live, which was a major focal point of a lot of spiritual battles and entities coming for help and all kinds of stories, and not just me seeing them. That when my congregation was gathered together and we were doing practice, they would see the things in the room with us sitting there during the Dharma teachings and meditation practices. They could see them on the walls, they could see them in the ceiling, and they were like, is there things in here with us listening to the sermon? It's like, yeah, they've come in here for education. They want to learn, they want to move on. So it's not only me, there was, sometimes a dozen people that were seeing various entities. But I remember two of the darker entities that we noticed. My daughter kept talking about the man with a bull's head that was standing in the yard staring up at her window all the time.
Like a minotaur?
Something like that, yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And then I remember I was having a dream, but I went into, and I was sleeping when everybody had gone away. I was taking a nap, and I went into my daughter's room, and there was an entity at the window that looked like kind of like a green sea hag that was perched itself in the frame of the window. And because the house was sealed off, those entities couldn't get in. But still, I was kind of psychically affected by seeing this thing, and it kind of trying to lash out at me and get in. And I woke up and I wasn't in my bed anymore. I had wandered off and was laying in the room actually. So there's been various beings like that people have talked to, or that I've seen in various visions, or I know I went into this one apartment to do a cleansing, and this one room where supposedly rape had happened in this room with this couple, I know the room, when the lights shut off and I sat in there for the longest time, it looked like it was raining in the room. And that's how the energy manifested, was some type of like downpour of energy. And I had to do a cleansing ritual. And once I got done, they went back into the room and it felt lifted and light. And there was no longer that nasty, decrepit, negative energy in there that was almost not even human shaped. It was kind of like a atmospheric condition.
Wow.
Yeah, just
That's
the
freaky.
range of entities and experiences is so wild. But have you guys ever encountered anything that's especially positive that's not a ghost? Or, you know, if you can experience demons, do you ever have something that's more like in the angelic sort of spectrum of entities?
I've got an experience, and this is something I kind of mentioned it early in the show, where when this happened, I couldn't really deny anymore. Even though I've had all these experiences, even though I've seen all these things, I would always have this kind of skeptic. You know, I'd try to find some explanation. You know, I'd have a conversation with the ghost box, and then I'd find myself the next day saying, "Well, you know what probably is happening." You know, that was radio was flipping through a lot of channels, and you just your mind was looking for it. You heard the words. You know, it was flipping past Jim Rome or something, and it went to Jim Rome to Rush Limbaugh to George Norrie, and you just strung together a conversation from those guys. But one time, this was the weirdest. I don't even really know how to describe it, but I was in Florida, and I was in a hotel, and the lights were like going off and coming on and going off and coming on. It was almost as if they were trying to communicate, like a light shorting out. You know how like you like picture that your light bulb goes out, but then it just comes back on.
Yeah.
And then it starts doing that almost like in a pattern, and it happens dozens of times, and nobody's over there flicking on the light switches. Well, I didn't really know what to make of it. I could tell something very bizarre, something weird was happening, and it was notable to me. Well, where it gets interesting is the next day, or it might have been the day after, I was talking to a friend back in Oregon, where I'd moved to Florida, and she told me that a mutual friend of ours had committed suicide. And it turned out that it had happened at the same time that experience had happened. And the craziest thing is he wasn't that close of a friend, but it was a close enough friend where, you know, I felt bad. I was affected. And I didn't really think of it at the time. And I kind of realized it later on. And my mind made that connection. And I said, wait, when did it happen? And I put it together, and it happened at the same time that I was having this experience. And I don't have any reason to know that it was connected, but I feel like it must have been.
Yeah. It seems like the coincidence is more unbelievable than the correlation. Well, and also I feel like because maybe you have agreed to on like a spiritual, mental, whatever level to investigate these things or see these things or be open to these things, maybe that person could only come and show that to you. Like maybe they're not allowed to just do it to random people, you know, even if it's their best friend or their lover or whatever, because those people are, nope, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Like,
right.
You know, maybe there's some level of consent involved in it.
Yeah, and what really struck me is just the distance too, because like you think about it. I mean, of course, like when you really think about it, you wouldn't think that a ghost or an entity would be restricted by geography, but still, it's like something's happening 3,000 miles away, and it's like something trying to break through. It was really strange.
Yeah, especially after talking about them being connected to a certain geography or time, and then like, you know, but they could go anywhere, anytime. Yeah, what do you think, Alan? Have you encountered any positive sort of beings of spiritual matter?
Well, of course, dealing in my tradition, we have many angelic positive forces that take on various manifestations of energy when you summon them and call them to do certain things. But the one that was the most knock you over the head blatant was I went down in the middle of the night to use the restroom, which was in the hallway from the teaching room with this huge altar that I had built. And I remember seeing a vision of an entity called Paranormal, which if you saw the entity, you'd probably think, my God, the thing's a demon, but it's a wrathful form of energy that's used to defend and repress evil. And it was glowing a bluish violet red. And I was just like, okay. And I didn't really want to say anything because I didn't know what to say. And I just worshiped and then went back to sleep. And that was the most blatant, obvious one I've ever seen. But the energies of these beings are very palpable, and you can feel them when you summon them and you use them in ritual to either nail down, repress, or cleanse, or help beings or whatever. So it definitely manifests and gives you various different physical as well as emotional and reactionary energies when you do deal with them.
Yeah, what a good thing for people to understand as well. Were you going to add something, Jay?
No, I was just going to say that reminds me of stories that I've heard where people describe like angels protecting them and that sort of thing, and it's just like something unfathomable, like something massive and that you can't even necessarily put into words, but you just feel humbled by it, and you feel so small. And I've never had an experience like that, but I've heard people say like they were, being attacked, whether by something physical or incorporeal, and then something else intervened to help them.
It's happened to me. I can attest it's real. Something totally outside of myself has been like a shield at times of need against spiritual energies. And I always also, someone just mentioned that their father sort of came to them after death and was like kneeling next to them, and they experienced it. And it reminded me that I've had that similar type of experience with my own father who passed on, and very, very obvious like energy and movement and affection and interaction is like beyond description. But when people ask me, have I ever seen a ghost? I'm always like, no. Or like, have I ever experienced a ghost? I'm like, no, I've had like demonic stuff and other things. So I've never had a ghost. So it's weird to me. I just am now realizing that I don't classify that as a ghost. Somehow in my head, a ghost is like almost like what you guys were talking about, like the recording in the sort of space or the earth instead of like a conscious, intentional interaction. But I guess that's not actually what it is. So if you've ever asked me if I saw a ghost and I said no, I wasn't lying. My brain is like not associating those two things with each other for some reason. Being visited by.
If it's somebody that you know, that you knew, but that I guess it's them. Easier to. Yeah, it's a person. I guess the essence of it is a ghost is a person. It's just a person in a different state, person without their body. Or I guess in some cases, maybe a person with their body. I've heard of stories where people. I haven't had this occur, at least as far as I know. Maybe I have. I don't know. Where you interact with a spirit and they look just like you or me. Is that something that you've ever seen?
I don't know that it's happened to me, but I always wonder if I have had that happen, especially when you have like a really weird experience with somebody you've never met or whatever. They're a stranger and you have this like really meaningful interaction, and then you're never going to see them again. And then I look back, I'm like, shit, I'll never know if that was even a real person or not. Technically, right? It could have been like a ghost or something weird.
Yeah, I remember in the house, there was my daughter's best friend ballerina ghost. And I remember two instances of dealing with that spirit. I was home alone one day, and I was, sitting on the toilet, and I heard really loud, "Daddy," and nobody was home. And I was like, oh my God, not now, of all places, please not now. Like, this is the worst place for something like this to happen. And then I got done and I looked around, I couldn't find anything. And then a little while later, everybody was home and my daughter was in the basement. My wife was in the kitchen and I was sitting in the front room, and I looked up the stairwell, which had a railing going up, and there looked like someone kind of like my daughter in a fluffy ballerina dress was looking through the railings at me, and I was like, "Oh, hello, are you ballerina?" And then she took off running up the steps and went into my daughter's room, and I never saw her again.
Wow.
She's like, "You could see me, shit." Run.
Yeah. My daughter's only your daughter's only supposed to see me. The one thing I was going to say about, and this kind of gets, I guess it's paranormal, but negative entities I've dealt with is cultists. And in Ohio, we have a lot of cultists here. And they used to be extremely active in the 80s and 90s. And I remember we stopped off at this one place over by Wooster, Ohio, which is a hardcore satanic area in this place called Shreve Swamp. And we stopped by this house, got out, and we heard chanting. And we're like, now, come on. Now, this is like Hollywood-esque level stuff. And we noticed this bonfire, and we thought, okay. So we crossed the road and went through this little patch of field, which was littered with all of those old ceramic pipes they would use for sewers and drains and stuff. And we got up to the edge and looked through the woods. And there's this farmhouse, and there's a bonfire with an altar and people in robes around it chanting. And I mean, it looked like something from a freaking horror movie.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, and they're just getting louder and louder. And we're like, we should probably get the hell out of here. And so we backed around and we started walking out. And I said, hold on a second. And everybody stopped. And then all of a sudden we heard crunch, crunch. And everybody kind of like, you could see like the sweat start beating. And I'm like, to the car. And we ran to the car, and someone was chasing us out of there. And we peeled out of there. And then another time, there was this place called Lover's Lane and a place called Polk, Ohio, which is hardcore, corruptible place. And we went down this trail, and we were in a truck with a bed in the back of it. There was 3 of us, and then 2 in the front cab. And it was known to be a place where cult members would meet. And we were going down the trails like, okay, if we're going to see anybody. And the whole field moved with people, and they surrounded the truck and tried to pull us out of the truck. And they had weapons, axes, and baseball bats. Jesus. And it was literally something from a movie where we were doing physical combat with dudes in robes trying to pull us out and get us out of this truck. And he peeled out of there, and we didn't go back after that.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
But it was, it was real deal. I mean, this was like, hundreds of people meeting there.
Did they have a sign somewhere that said "Weaving spiders this way," or what does it say? "Weaving spiders this way, don't come," or something?
Oh, no. It was just known to be a very active place, and we wanted to go and see what was going on. But yeah, you could find that stuff all over Ohio all the time, and go into abandoned places that have been turned into altar rooms. I mean, my God, I remember we, as teenagers, we went into this building that was supposedly used by cult members, and we went upstairs, and there was markings all over the walls, spray painted and painted, and there was paraphernalia all over the ground. And we went into the basement, and we had flashlights, and we heard a weird scurrying noise, and we flashed over to the back of the wall. And there was, and God's honest truth, there was a crucifix with a pigeon that had been crucified on it. It was upside down, and there was rats crawling all around this crucifix. And we were like, oh, hell no, and just ran out of there and never went back to that building again. So the town I grew up in and the surrounding area was just laced with that stuff nonstop.
I've heard
have so many stories like that. It's like the place where you're living is like the center of evil in the world. But what were you gonna say, Jay?
No, I was gonna say the same thing. I heard the same thing about Ohio. I want to say Southern Ohio, like there's like caves and there's satanic activity that happens there, and I mean, sure, there's stuff like that happens all over the country. But I remember specifically hearing it about Ohio, and I want to say North Carolina.
Wow.
Something like that. I don't know why. Do you have any idea why? What draws them to the heartland?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of violent tragedy going back to the founding of Ohio, and there's a lot of people that came over from the Appalachian Mountains that brought a lot of various darker culture with them. And there's a lot of people who are in power that have used dark power to get where they're at. And it just flows downward and infects everything, because evil is like a corrupting black goo that gets on people that are in, I mean, for instance, there's this place called the Iron Bridge, and that's off of Route 603. And we heard that cult members, including the police, would meet there. So we went down there on one full moon, and sure enough, there's just a bunch of police cars and other cars lined up, parked in this area. And we're like, you've got to be kidding me. So we parked in a way to where we could peel out of there very quick. And we walked down the trail, and sure enough, they're down this trail, and they had animals, and they had knives. And we were discovered and chased out of there, and we took back roads to lose anybody that was following us. But yeah, it was sheriffs and police that had gone there, and whoever else was in all the other cars. And we're like, wow. So, and it was known that our police were involved in this stuff and a lot of nefarious dealings. And that was the blatant, obvious evidence that we needed to see, like, yeah, these guys are really involved in this stuff heavy.
Like it's part of the history and the culture of that area. For whatever reason, it's been established as such. It's got to have some ley lines or like some geographical significance as well, because, again, like why Ohio? Like, I don't know.
Well, even like Athens, Ohio is known to be a very major hotbed with a college down there. I remember years ago going through there wanting to investigate, and a lot of the buildings had blacked out basement windows.
Wow. Gross.
I mean, just painted black. And you're like, okay, that's a little odd for a historical building to have painted their windows black. But supposedly things went on in the basement. The cult members would meet, and it was a inner circle of people that were running everything. And the Athens College has a history of being greatly haunted, all kinds of very odd things there. They have a museum on the campus that has a lot of Native American artifacts. So you have that energy going on of stolen artifacts or whatever. So there's just, I think it's just a lot of corrupting influences just being thrown into the pot, one thing after another, and then whatever likes that energy drinks from it and feeds on it.
Yeah. It's like someone was mentioning, I think it was Chuck in the chat was mentioning earlier, there's like portals or vortexes in different places. And, some can be a vortex for sort of like good and positive energy, and some can be a vortex for like negative and evil energy. And I am sure the evil people are really good at knowing those locations and exploiting them. I wish the good people were better at finding the opposite and doing the same.
Well, and also the thing is, when you are somebody that goes and does those things, people are like, well, why would you do that? You're pretty crazy. You're going to get all these negative things to attack you. And you're like, yeah, but somebody's got a calling to do it. And some people somebody's got to step up and do it. And some people make a life decision that that's what they want to do. And you burden the weight of it, just like a soldier might burden the weight that someday they've got to pick up an arms and go to battle, but they know that ahead of time. And once you see the joy on a family's face for purifying their house and getting an entity out of their house, it makes it all worthwhile.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I love that you're that hardcore about that work. And I don't know how much time you guys have. I don't know if we need to start winding it down soon, but I also want to get your ideas about aliens. I know we talked about alien ghosts, but actual what we call aliens or UFOs, what do you guys think about those, and do they interact with this realm we're talking about at all, or how does
Well,
that connect?
I was gonna say, I've heard that a lot of the aliens and their technology is kept in Ohio. Is that where Right Pat is?
Yeah,
It's
good point.
well, Right Pat is literally 1 minute down the road from me, and I can tell you that the stories are terrifying of what goes on that base. There's a whole underground system and hangars and tunnels and everything that goes on in there. There's a video online that you can watch on YouTube where somebody films this ship over Right Pat, and it looks like a scintillating metallic violet purple thing that's changing shape and then just goes up into the clouds. So there's all kinds of material like that. And in fact, there's an Air Force base in Richland County, Mansfield, Ohio, that supposedly stored alien bodies there as well. And I know someone who was an Air Force person who had to retire after they saw some things like that and could no longer handle working for the Air Force, knowing what was going on, and actually saw aliens. And they just said, I either had to leave or something was going to be done to me, and they were silenced for it. And so there's a lot that goes on in Ohio. It's a major hotbed. If you can get into an area that's very dark and you can see all the stars in the sky, you're going to see stars that go straight up and then take a right angle and go across the sky that they normally, we don't have anything that, well, things that we know. So Ohio is well known, and I have a lot of personal experiences myself, and actually my family does, but I really don't want to get into it because it's not pleasant in any shape or form. But needless to say, there's a whole group of us, 4 of us at the same time, that have had experiences and negative consequences and things like that. So there's a lot of people in Ohio that have had experiences. And there was also in the 70s or 60s or 50s, but there was a ship that was seen floating over into various counties that was witnessed by multiple people. So there's a lot of instances of that too.
Yeah. And then you go down a little bit farther south. I guess you go down to the West Virginia border and you got Mothman and
oh sure
Cold.
Yeah.
I think with aliens, I mean, I don't really I'm more scared of aliens than anything else, honestly. If there's aliens out there, that's terrifying, because if they've got the kind of technology and the kind of power to do what people say they can do, I mean, and they're physical, actually being able to get into our world and have a physical form, that's scary to me. But I feel that I'm more apt to believe that they're interdimensional than from another planet. I think that they're here. They're just maybe not here, because it doesn't seem feasible that they'd be coming as far away as you'd have to come to come from another star system or what have you.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same mind, only because I've had experiences with what people would call aliens or UFOs, and I've had experiences with what we would call maybe demons or poltergeists, and then I've had experiences with what we would call ghosts, and only the ghost part wasn't similar. Like the alien was very similar to the aliens are very similar to the sort of demonic, and so I don't know where I would draw the line. They're just manifesting in different ways as far as I can tell, but or interdimensional, but it's all the same sort of like substance,
Yeah.
But I also don't know if there's
a lot of people think
or if there's also physical beings here,
both
that are interdimensional, or I also don't doubt that these types of things could possess a advanced enough complex enough sort of system, like a robot or something, or a person, if it was allowed.
An android.
Yeah.
Well, and also another theory that some of the aliens could be us in the future coming back on our timeline to look in on us.
Yeah.
Let's see what happened 1 million years ago.
Or get genetic material because they're like, fuck, we screwed up and we need like more.
They can't reproduce anymore because they got they screwed with themselves so much that they can't screw with themselves anymore. Yeah. So they got to go back into their distant past and get that DNA.
Well, I want to ask you guys to share with people, because there's a lot of people now who are like, holy shit, Alan and Jay are so rad. So where can people go find more of you or connect with you further? Or do you have any like things coming up that you want to share with people, or, promote yourselves?
Go ahead, Jay.
All right. I'll go first. So normally you could see me being a lot more goofy, a lot sillier. I do a show every week with my wife. It's called The War on Morons. It's kind of like a sketch comedy show. We make fun of stories in the news about Florida man, about stupid people, about dumb criminals. Just about weird stories, and then we've got an element of theater involved. We've got a whole cast of crazy characters that call in every week. Actually, our most recent episode, we do it every Monday night. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us pretty much anywhere. Just look for The War on Morons. Our most recent episode was a Halloween special, and we actually did a whole deal about ghost hunting and the paranormal. We had a lot of fun with that. So if you enjoyed this episode and you want to see a comedic take on it, you might want to check out the most recent episode 52 of War on Morons. And the only thing I have to plug, if you can help us out, we're involved in a pretty big contest right now to basically win a contest against other podcasts. If you go to our Twitter at On Morons, it's pinned to the top. If you could just vote for us, that would be awesome.
I'm going to find that and put it in the chat right now so that everybody can really easily go do that.
Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, go ahead.
No, my cat.
Oh,
that's
sorry,
a good thing.
I wasn't watching it.
My cat's been trying to get into this room for the last 30 minutes. I hear.
Oh, you actually. Oh, yeah, you did the smart thing. Yeah.
All right, I finally got it. There is that link. Everybody go vote right now for War on Morons. That's so exciting. I know you're going to win because last time you killed it. And Alan, was there anything else you wanted to share, Jay, with anybody about where to go or how to find you? Or
that's all I got. Just look for War on Morons. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, every Monday night, 7:00 Eastern. And we just get goofy and we have fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Alan? Where would you like people to go to connect with you further?
Well, we got a new investigation we just did a couple weeks ago that I mentioned, which is the Woodlawn Cemetery, which is one of the oldest and biggest cemeteries around, where the Wright brothers are buried. And we went to their graves and got interesting evidence. And then we also did what's called the Patterson Tower and got a little evidence there as well. The channel that our videos are going to be appearing on now is, if you go on YouTube and you look up Ghost Doctor, you should be able to find Chris's channel, as well as going to pursuitoftheparanormal.com. That's where Chris has a lot of our links and videos up. Ghostbehaviorist.com. So there's a couple areas that you can go to. For myself, you can look up my name on Facebook if you want to follow the antics on my regular stuff. But if you're interested in the more solidified teachings and aspects of what I get into philosophically wise, you can go to Facebook and look up Red Lotus Temple, and that will connect you with my Facebook page. You can also follow me on Instagram, the Heruka, Heruka, and you can also go to redlotustemple.net, and my YouTube channel Lindsay knows that one. It's the Mahadharmapala, and that's where I put pretty much all my teaching videos of philosophy, martial arts, exercise, energy work, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple avenues of getting stuff like that. If anybody's interested in any further communication, they can email me, redlotustemple@aol.com is one way to get hold of me, and you can throw any questions you want my way. Always happy to oblige.
Awesome. I love it. And I'm pretty sure my YouTube links to both of your guys' channels. So somewhere on there, if you guys can find it, it's already there.
Awesome.
So cool. And so do you guys have any final thoughts that you want to leave people with, or just ideas that you want to bring to people's attention, or anything like that?
Well, hey, Halloween's coming up. It's been a very strange year. I think it's been a very good year, regardless of what they try to tell us on TV. Let's enjoy it. Let's not let them take away our fun. Let's not let them take away our spookiness either. So let's enjoy Halloween, and let's enjoy this wonderful time of the year.
And it's a full moon Halloween. Whoop, whoop. What about you, Alan?
If you want to focus on masks, go get a nice rubber one that looks like a scary clown or a skeleton and wear that one as much as possible.
Yeah, that's way more fitting than the medical paper thing that came from the dirty floor of some Malaysian sweatshop.
No.
Awesome. Well, fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing, and this has been your analog electric concentric dose of wisdom, according to the hilarious Jay Ritichie of War on Morons. Jay, thank you so much for being here tonight. You kicked ass.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you.
And
according to Alan, the sage and the studious Alan, thank you so much for being here as well.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a heck of a time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks all the viewers for
Thursday.
Thanks all the viewers for tuning in on us. It was wonderful for you to join us this time. Thanks, Jay and Lindsay. I appreciate the time to spend with you.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Yes. So much. Good point. And so the fear we feel from the unknown is a beautiful thing, actually. It keeps us investigating and teaches us courage to move into what we've never experienced before. It helps us grow. We face it, unmask it, and find that we are more powerful than we thought. We literally empower ourselves in this process. Soon we find we can face nearly anything and that we are truly unbreakable. Whoops. Haha. At the most fundamental level of self, we learn that we can overcome nearly anything, create nearly any reality we choose, and become fearless along the way. And all of that we are gifted from the simple emotion of fear. During this creepy time of the year and during any agenda rollouts that bring the fear with them, remember to pause and consider how you've conquered every single fear you've ever had. And you will conquer this one too. So until you do, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah! I can kiss even from a mask.